let's start with some specific news and something we've been waiting for, right? The announcement of hub cities. It certainly looks like at this point, according to all reports, we are down to 2. We have them, and they are now Edmonton and Toronto. Vegas, we thought was the front runner, but of course, because public safety, public health, and spikes in COVID, it appears that we're going to get 2 cities in Canada. And my 2 Canadian friends, this news broke on Canada Day, no less. So let's start there. These hub cities and your reaction to them. Keith Jones, start with you.
Well, I think it works, Liam. I do think a lot of it had to do with what you just mentioned, with some of the U.S. cities spiking with more coronavirus cases. And Edmonton and Toronto have both done a very good job. They're both great cities. They're both great hockey towns. But most importantly, right now, there's less virus around. And I think that's obviously advantageous for both of those marketplaces. I think it works because one's in the Western time zone and one's in the Eastern. And one's not even that far west. It's more a little bit closer to the East Coast than some teams like Vegas would be or LA. But I do think that there's advantages to be in the Eastern Conference with Eastern Conference teams playing there. And it certainly works for television because we're going to have games on all day long. And if you're starting out west, you're not starting at 9 a.m. You have a chance to start, at probably 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I think that's better as well. So I think they made great choices, and I think both cities stood out as being safe places to be right now.
Yeah, and as a player, guys, I don't think it really matters what city you're going to. Edmonton and Toronto are in the playoffs. I guess they're going to be in their home cities, but they're expected to be in the bubble as well. They're not going to be at their homes, living their normal life with this huge home ice advantage. So I think League did a good job of finding 2 places that are certainly capable of hosting all these teams. There's going to be a lot of rinks, a lot of ice availability. And from a player standpoint, it's your hotel room, it's the conference room with your team or the meal room, whatever you want to call it. And it's on the bus to your locker room to play a game. It's going to be very isolated, I'm assuming. And I'm looking forward to see how it all turns out.
Yeah, it looks like Toronto will be the East, and obviously Edmonton would be the West. And yeah, they would be home cities, but they're in the same situation. They're all in the bubble. And Sharpie, we talked about this in the past. I mean, it has, in some ways, without the fans, just this world championship feel, right? As a player, and you mentioned players kind of embrace this, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's different for everybody. I mean, nobody really knows what to expect. We can talk about it. You can plan it out all you want. Guys are skating, preparing to play, but really we don't know how this is all going to play out until we see it on television. I'm excited to be covering it. I love how it's East and West. Jonesy makes a great point. That makes it a lot easier for players. They're not starting games at 9 a.m. to accommodate other people in different time zones. So I'm excited about it. I think the players will be happy to get going and playing. And once that puck drops, it's kind of like the build up towards an outdoor game, to be quite honest with you. All the different elements, you don't know how it's all going to play out. Then as soon as that puck drops, the focus gets right down on the ice, and it's hockey business as usual. So I'm excited to see hockey back.
And Liam,
ahead,
I would just the one thing I would add is I don't think coaches have ever been more important than what they're going to be during these circumstances. I mean, the players are going to be looking for leadership. They're going to be looking for a lot of different direction. They're going to be looking for someone that's going to be, making sure that they're focused on the game plan. Making sure that they have one, making sure that they're ready to go under these adverse circumstances. It's going to be a really demanding job from head coaches and their assistant coaches around the league to try to get these guys energized, motivated, whatever it takes to go out there and try to win a Stanley Cup. And you've got to be ready when this thing starts. So coaches have a real big task here. And I know they've been doing a lot of thinking about exactly how they're going to approach this when things really start to get going in the next couple of weeks.
I think you talk about energy, you talk about motivation, and really the sense of urgency. And that exists right now because they're not just negotiating return to play, but as I mentioned, negotiating a CBA. And that's a whole lot of elements to negotiate and try to fit in, to try to make all of this work. And it seems like from reports, both sides seem to grasp and realize the situation that we're all in and the economic situation and the impacts it's had. And revenue is clearly being impacted and will continue to be impacted for the foreseeable future. So the idea is to mitigate that, to spread it out, and to have potentially a fixed salary cap at what's been reported $81.5 million. So to fix that, But also because of that, other things are being negotiated as well. And one of the things that we're seeing reported is the idea that the players again pushed to be back in the Olympics. And it looks like there's potential. It looks like that is going to happen, which, I mean, I don't even have to ask yet. I know it's good news for us, and I think it's good news for the fans, Sharpie.
Yeah, it's great news for the fans. I know a lot of the players wanted to play as well. My question is there not enough to do with the NHL and the NHLPA offices right now with the logistics of coming back to play, that they've got time to put a new CBA together? If they're willing to do it from both sides, that's great news for us, the fans, because you look around professional sports, there's some other leagues that are struggling with work and labor peace. And if the NHL can come to terms, not only to come back and play, finish the season, award the Stanley Cup, but solidify a CBA for years to come, that'll be an impressive task to get that done. But you mentioned the Olympics. I think it's a no-brainer that we send our best athletes to the biggest show globally, and that's the Olympic Games. You know, I think of all the great moments that you've seen, whatever country you're from, there's great moments ingrained in your brain watching hockey growing up. I think of the Czech Republic winning the Olympics. How about Dominic Hasek? I mean, there's kids in the Czech that dream of those moments. The Hall of Fame class that just went in. I watched Kim St. Pierre, the women's goaltender, play well in Olympics, winning gold medals. Jerome McGinley, all the great moments he had wearing the Hockey Canada jersey. TJ Oshie in this past Russian Olympics a couple years ago. It's a huge stage. You want the best competition there. The fact that they're even talking about this with upcoming CBA negotiations, I think it's a good thing, and I hope it gets done.
But I agree, Sharpie, and the Olympics would be an awesome bonus for all of us, and at NBC also, as Liam just mentioned, too. It would be a lot better than the last Olympic hockey that we covered. Obviously, we want to see the best in the world play against one another, so that would be awesome. The fact that they're pulling all this together, it just seems remarkable to me based upon how contentious negotiations have been in the past with CBA arguments, and how long things have been drawn out, and how many lockouts we've had, and how many times the players have went on strike. I mean, the history has not been great between both sides. So this is very impressive, and I have to give both sides a lot of credit if they somehow manage to get all of this done amidst what we're dealing with all around us. I think that would be incredibly great news. And fingers are crossed on that one. Very hopeful that is what happens. And if it is, then I'm extremely impressed. I think it's big picture. It's awesome news for the NHL.
I know the players want it. The fans want it. Obviously, NBC want it. But I think it's good for the game as well. You mentioned TJ Oshie. I've spoken to him a few times about his experience in Sochi. And it is good for the game because TJ Sochi, as
there you go.
known as. I mean, this is a guy who I think NHL fans knew, but he became like a global international superstar overnight. And ultimately, that is good for the game, and it is good for the league. I want to go into a few other things here, and one is timeline. Looks like Phase 3 could be pushed back to July 13th. It was July 10th. That shouldn't push everything else back, because then after that, it looks like you're talking about July, 25th to arrive, July 27th, 28th in that region for a exhibition, and then August 1st to play games. Also of note is that players can choose to opt out of the return to play. Don't have to really have a specific reason. Want to get your reaction to that, Jonesy? Smart.
I mean, it's the way it should be. And if there's a player that's uncomfortable, maybe an example would be his wife's pregnant and due to have a baby at any time. Maybe there's 3 other kids at home, and there's a lot of responsibilities that player has. Under these circumstances, he should be permitted to stay home. So I don't think there's going to be a whole bunch of guys that elect to do that, but I do think there could be a handful of players that would apply to, and it should be written in there. So I think that's another great thing that would be negotiated in, and it's something that absolutely should be in there, especially if maybe there's diabetes, who knows what the underlying issues might be. But obviously players in the NHL are human beings, and they all have different things that could affect their decision on why they would return.
It just goes to show you how much a thought is involved in putting these decisions together. I mean, if you're a player packing up to leave for home, what do you say? I might be back in 7 to 10 days, or I could see in a couple months, depending on the success of the team. So unique circumstances for sure, but we'll see how it all plays out down the road.
Well, you guys were in the league for a long time. Players plan on having babies July, August. Is that something that goes on?
Yeah, I probably. I wouldn't be surprised, right? I think they'd rather not. I think you'd rather have one come out in January in the middle of the season, so you don't have to be home when that baby's crying for the first couple of months.
I think that says
Jonesy
more
always,
about you. Really.
Jonesy always tried to plan it for end of August, September, so he could get out of some of the fitness testing and training camp, I'm sure.
You know it. My daughter was born on Christmas Day, so you figure the planning out on that one. But
well, yeah. Well, you're off on that day, and then you're like, oh, back to work.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Kid's spoiled.
Great. Well, listen. I mean, it appears like we're getting closer. I mean, and just for you two, I mean, are you amazed a little bit at everything that has to be done and everything that is getting done and the collaboration we are seeing at this point, Sharpie?
Yeah, I'm amazed at it, to be quite honest with you. Just when you think you've got it all figured out, you've got all the news from all the reliable sources, and you think you know what's going to happen, there's a whole nother ball of wax that you got to think of, another bound of issues that are coming down the pipe that you got to think about. And I just think how unique this is going to be, how awesome it's going to be. I'm watching some Premier League soccer on NBC, and it's kind of cool how they're doing kind of shading the crowd, playing some fan noise for the game. The game on TV looks great. So I'm excited to see what our game's going to look like, what these playoffs are going to be like. The buildings are going to be empty. I know that's kind of an eerie feeling sometimes for a player, but I'm sure it's all going to work out cool and look pretty special on TV.
Jonesy, final thought?
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm really curious to see how the players handle it all. And as Sharpie just mentioned, the fact that they're playing without fans in the stands, there's going to be an adjustment. It's going to take some time, but they're professionals, and I think they'll figure it out pretty quickly. But it will be a strange feeling for those guys when they step on the ice, look around, and see a bunch of empty seats. They're not used to that, so it'll be fun to watch and see where it takes us.